there are so many people who want to change, or they say they want to change, and they don't really. They just want things to be different. And a lot of times they don't want things to be different because if things were different, then what would they complain about?
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start a joyful rebellion. Over the years, I've been around people who spent a lot of time trying to fix their lives, but not much time actually paying attention to them. My guest today is Kristan Swan. She started out as a business coach working with founders and entrepreneurs, but over time, she realized the real work wasn't about strategy. It was about awareness, something I love to talk about here. Now she helps people slow down, get curious about their own patterns, and reconnect with what actually matters through journaling, conversation, and something she calls a spiritual autobiography. We talk about redefining success and why so many of us feel disconnected even when life looks full, and how simple awareness can start to shift everything. If you've ever felt like something's off, but you can't quite name it, this one might help you see it. Kristan Swan, thank you for being here on A Joyful Rebellion today.
Thank you, James. I am delighted to be here. And this is a topic and subject that I think that we need to talk about all the time because I need it. I don't know about you, but I think I need it. And I know plenty of other people out in the world who can benefit from just thinking about things a little bit more expansively.
I'm curious. You started out as a business coach, so you were helping people get hit their KPI targets and hit all these goals and things that maybe sound or feel very corporate. Then something switched at some point in your life, and you said, you know what, I feel like I need to help people in a different way. What was it that made you go from being a business coach to someone who helps people more with the bigger questions of life and even sometimes their spirituality?
Thank you for asking that. Business coaching was just one of the stops along my career path. And it was primarily working with small independent business owners. And having been in the very entrepreneurial myself growing up and then even as an adult, the nice thing about the business coaching and the clients that I had is I was working a lot of times with the owners and founders of these businesses. And quickly you realize, I even realized this in having my own businesses, that this division that we create of our professional self and our personal self is kind of a myth. It is something that I think in some ways COVID really kind of disrupted that idea of these two parts of ourselves. And the more I worked with my business owners, I realized how deeply impacted they were by what was happening in their personal lives as well as their professional lives. And then I also was witnessing, because we'd meet on a regular basis and do our touch base, and I would be hearing about kind of dissatisfaction or just issues that were happening because something didn't happen that they were hoping was going to happen. And what I was really witnessing over time was patterns of behavior. And so I am a big believer that I am not in the business of changing people. As a business coach or even in my current role, changing people is going to lead to a lot of frustration for you and sometimes the other person. So I know in my own life that when I was able to gain just even a little like window into some awareness about what I was thinking, what I was feeling, kind of what I was doing, that gave me the opportunity to start to not immediately oftentimes, but just to contemplate doing things differently, or why was all of this happening. So that's when I created Spaghetti on the Wall, the journal that is really meant to be a daily practice. And it's meant to give you that insight, that awareness about what's working in your life, what may not be working, and just giving you that glimpse. Because the way that it's set up is the very kind of the heart of the journaling part is asking you to assume the role of a non-judgmental observer. I think that that's so important because I know for myself that feeling shame, feeling guilt, feeling generally questioning myself didn't really move the needle for me. And so I think that's why I created the journal in this way for initially my clients, these business owners, to gain this awareness. And of course, we create things and we teach things that we ourselves need to learn. And my personal life, I was repeating patterns that were not beneficial for me, for my family, and I needed to do this practice of sitting down with myself daily and writing in that non-judgmental observer eye, and then going back in and kind of evaluating again what things were working, what things not so much, and then being able to make choices, basically informed choices, right from there, that could really move me towards the things that I was saying that I really wanted in my life.
So you saw the patterns in your clients and you saw how things were going in your own life. What was it about the journal specifically that you thought, oh, this could help? Had you been doing it in your own life for a while and you said, this worked for me, maybe it could work for them. Let's see.
You know, I have always been a big journaler. I didn't call it journaling when I was first doing it as a little kid. I would, get those at Christmas time. I'd get that new diary that had the little lock on
The
it,
lock.
a tiny key that I would always lose. And so then I'd have to just, take a butter knife and flip the lock open, which is all it took. So I've always kept some sort of diary. That has been a helpful place to explore kind of where I was, what I was thinking. But honestly, it wasn't until I am deep in creating this tool for my clients. I'm so disconnected from myself at this point that I'm like, oh, this is going to be so great for my clients. And only when I begin to do it with my clients, because I don't like being one of those people who's like, oh, you should do this when I'm doing something totally different. So I'm doing it with them. And that's when I'm realizing, oh my God, this is so helpful. So I have to say that it was kind of one of those moments where, thank goodness, my curiosity and my creativity overcame my blind spots about my own choices, essentially.
You work for a lot of self-employed people, founders. Is there a type? Because I'm guessing in my mind here, in the times that I've gone in and I've maybe done documentary work or commercial work for these types of business owners or creators, they tend to be really driven. They tend to be creative, and they tend to have the ability to and there's no middle ground that I've discovered, but they can either really focus down on what it is they're doing, or they're all over the place in creative land and have trouble executing. And as a business coach, you had to be that observer, like that non-judgmental observer, and sort of show them their blind spots. And it sounds like this journal was an extension of that. Like when you couldn't be around, when you weren't meeting with them, they could put in their own handwriting what was going on. And then maybe with a little bit of clarity after the fact, because hindsight's 2020 later on, right? Down the road when you see, oh, I did have 17 projects going on at one time, and I was frustrated because I couldn't get, this XYZ project done. But at the same time, I had so many other things grabbing my attention, my energy, and my focus. And they can look at that. I've had that experience myself where I look 6 months back at something I'd written in a journal page and was like, oh, I have no reason to be complaining right now. I was complaining back then, and 6 months has gone by and I've done not one thing about it. So here we are. Did your clients start having those experiences when they started working through some of the journal exercises you gave them?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, well, to your point of the kind of entrepreneurial spirit and personality, I think you're very apt in your description of that, highly creative person, no shortage of great ideas, and sometimes the execution, right, can get a little wiggly. I can fall into that camp occasionally myself, right? As a business coach, is kind of their guide. It's a couple of things working, especially with business founders. That was so interesting because I even talked about this many, many years ago, this founder syndrome, where one of my kind of favorite things to do was to help guide people to maturing with their business, because the person who starts a business oftentimes is not the same type of leader or kind of idea generator that is the person that needs to shepherd the business into the next phases of its life. So we would talk about that. And I think that that's also very apt for just our personal lives and recognizing kind of these different chapters that we undergo, whether it's due to age or due to circumstance. So always one of the things I would do, and I think this is a good exercise for everyone, is, of course, with business coaching, there's a lot of, I want to be more successful. So I would always start with clients and say, well, what's your definition of success? Let's drill down on what this is for you. I don't want to hear you saying, well, you know what success is. It's just, I'm going to get bigger and bigger, and I'm going to amass more and more. And like, that might be somebody's. And I'm not here to judge what your definition of success is, but make sure it's your definition. And I think that goes for every single one of us. And it also is something that that questioning and that then reflecting is something that we all can benefit from, is asking ourselves at different points in our lives. And you can substitute different words. It doesn't have to be, what does a successful life look like, but what does a life of meaning look like for me, or purpose? And I do think it's going to change at different moments. I have children, and when I had younger children, there was my focus and it was in a certain area, and when it shifts. So I always call these wallpaper words like success or wealth or abundance, or even, there's a whole list of those. I think that I've always been, as a coach, even prior to realizing that I could create this tool for my clients, it's like, I think that curiosity and that willingness to ask yourself questions is such a simple and profound tool for really living into a life that has meaning for you.
That's the biggest part, the for you part, because that's how so many people arrived at this podcast in the first place, because they were given the meaning early on,
Yeah.
maybe before they were old enough to understand like how that was going to impact them. In fact, that's usually how it goes in the conversations I've had. You were told, hey, this will make you successful. Go to this school, do these things, take these courses. Oh, this profession does pretty well. It's recession proof. Go for that. And you get these pictures handed to you of what success looks like. And then you get through the ages, and you're right, it changes. As you're single in your 20s, you've got one version of what it looks like. And then you get to a certain age and you're like, success looks like being able to take a nap on a Wednesday afternoon if I want to.
Right.
And for some folks, it's exotic trips. So they're not interested in naps. So for everyone, it's going to be different. But also for everyone, there's no shortage of people around them telling them what would make them successful and what steps to take. And that's the whole idea behind a joyful rebellion, because sometimes we have to go against what everyone's told us all of our life. And sometimes they have so many hopes and dreams invested in us. And that could happen with a spouse. That could happen with, certainly happens with parents, but it could happen with other people as well. And I'm curious about this, about your work with founders, because we started out talking about how you noticed that people had their work life and how they thought about themselves, and they had their personal little things. Because founders of companies, the entrepreneurs, the people, they're kind of treated like celebrities now in our popular culture, the ones who stand out. And you also mentioned that they're not necessarily the ones who can take the company to where the vision is going to be. Sometimes you need more of a numbers person, a little less creative, a little more structured. But the founders are the ones who are celebrated, and the companies they create often become their identities.
Yeah.
So how do you work with someone where their identity is in the company, and maybe the company's not doing great? Maybe the company's under fire for, whatever, regulation or just economic stuff. And they start to feel the stress because they have made the mistake of mingling their identity with that thing they created.
Well, and I think you don't even have to be a CEO or founder of a highly successful firm, right? To have lost your identity to something else. I mean, I see it in women who their identity is tied to their children, right? I see it in people who, I'm of a generation where I have these young adult children, and I also have parents who are still alive. And I also have seen people, it's much less glamorous way of losing your identity, but losing yourself as a caregiver, right? Whether you're running a Fortune 500 company or giving of service to parents, children, extended family, these are all very socially accepted ways of being. I think it's worth asking yourself, is this your identity because you are ignoring who you really are? So going back to like the business owners, when they were struggling, and as you were saying, rightly so, that there's so much of their own identity and sometimes ego wrapped up in the success of the business. And again, I'm using success as kind of that broad general term that we culturally accept as the definition. Is let's kind of zoom out and really think about desired outcomes. And this is, I think, a great tool for even on a day-to-day kind of way of operating. I mean, I know for myself, I recently was in a bit of a disagreement with a close family member. And I was sitting there after the initial disagreement thinking, okay, we agreed to kind of reconvene and kind of talk some more. And so the whole time before I'm getting ready to talk to them, I'm going through my head around basically all of the justifications for my feeling kind of grumbly about this situation. I've got my list of reasons why I'm completely justified in my thinking. And, and as I was approaching the time when we were going to have this conversation, I was thinking, I don't know. Like, there's something that doesn't quite feel right about this approach that I'm taking. So, of course, I need to take my own advice, which is zoom out. I mean, what's this desired outcome and the desired outcome is this is a person that I deeply care about. This is someone that I want to have a relationship with. This is someone that I love. And do I need to be right in this moment? So the desired outcome actually led me away from kind of getting in the weeds of trying to fix a problem that wasn't really the problem, and just moving beyond that and seeing kind of more of a bigger picture of what do I want my relationship to be like with this person. And I think that's a very applicable type of thinking to personal, professional, whatever.
I find that really useful. I have someone that I communicate with a lot, and they'll ask me my opinion and about things, and 8 out of 10 times my response is, well, what's the goal?
Yeah.
What do you want out of it?
Right.
Because I could give you my opinion, but it might not work for you.
Right.
Because a lot of times my opinion is, well, if it's like between this and that, and I say, well, I'd throw both away if it was me. And they're like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I want to know which one to keep. And I was like, for me, it'd be neither, but what's your goal?
Yeah.
and then we get down to the real root of the issue, and then we can connect on a little deeper level. And I want to talk to you. When I was looking through your info, I saw this thing I'd never really seen before, but you described it as a spiritual autobiography.
Yeah.
And it's something that you have started to work with your clients, because now, if people are following us, you went from being the business coach to now you help people more holistically with their life. And that term, spiritual autobiography, came up, and I'm just curious what it's all about.
Spiritual autobiography is something that I cannot take credit for the term. The first time I heard it and participated in this exercise was many, many years ago, where I was informally associated with a local church. And actually, my mom talked me into going to a small group leadership facilitation course that they were offering. And I thought, well, this sounds good. And little did I know what an incredible gift this course would be. It was 8 weeks. It was quite rigorous and serious. And I enjoyed it so much and learned just a tremendous, tremendous amount. And of course, at the end of the course that they've gifted you, the ask is to facilitate small groups. And of course, I said yes. I was so grateful and also curious to put this into practice. So the group that they gave me were people who were curious about this particular congregation and whether or not they were new to the area. They were kind of church shopping. So, a little bit. They were maybe a little bit more serious, but still. So it was a great way to gather people. We would meet weekly, and one of our activities was to do a spiritual autobiography. Now, in the context of this setting, it was spirituality and religion were pretty closely enmeshed, as you would imagine, since it was through a church. Now, fast forward many years, I found myself at a crossroads. And I didn't really answer this question earlier. You were talking about how did I make that pivot between business coaching and what I do now. And what had happened is really during COVID, I'm so happy to say that I was able to be present for my clients, and all my clients did well and survived. Their businesses survived through the pandemic and beyond. And probably about a year after the pandemic was through and things were open again, and I just found myself so completely exhausted. I had given a lot of myself to my clients, which I willingly did. And of course, there wasn't much else to do. Like I said, it was my choice. And I don't think I didn't realize how tired I was. So I found myself ready to think about a change. And I didn't really know where I was going, which is highly unusual for me and very uncomfortable because I have always have an idea of what the next thing is going to be. So I ended up getting a master's of education. And I thought, I'll teach. And I completed the master's. And one of the things that I got reminded during that program is how much I love small group facilitation. And I also felt like this was a good time to be bringing people together to talk and to talk about things that maybe you don't talk about on the daily. And this whole experience of doing a spiritual autobiography has always stayed in my head. And I've done them subsequently through the years. And I thought, what about creating a curriculum for people to discover their spiritual autobiography? And so that's what I put together. And there is now a self-guided workbook, so that's available. But I do think that there's tremendous value doing it with other people because part of my intention was to build community and also have people maybe examine their beliefs and their thought in a gentle way, not combative and not confrontational, and really as deeply as they were willing to go. And it has been such a pleasure all throughout 2025. At different locations with different groups of people, I was able to do the Discovering Your Spiritual Autobiography workshop. In my version, it is completely non-denominational, and it kind of gets at the core of what is kind of bigger than yourself. For me, spirituality is just recognizing that there is something bigger than myself. For some people who have taken my workshop, I've learned that nature is their kind of spiritual home, so to speak. I've also taught people where religion and spirituality is hand in glove for them. And then I have kind of people at various other points. And the spiritual autobiography itself, it can be more, but it's essentially 1,000 to 1,500 words that can be a moment in time. Some people choose to do it very chronologically. It can be kind of an evolution of experiences. So the workshop and subsequent retreats that I also offer really take people through a variety of exercises that are ways to reflect upon their lives. I'm always basically asking a very similar question, but kind of getting at it from different types of exercises that engage the brain just a little bit differently.
When it came to making that pivot you described from being a business coach to being a more of a life coach, a spiritual guide for people, what was the difference in the way the goals changed for your clients? So in the beginning, you were helping people with results-based goals. Now, what did that look like? What was the shift when you asked someone who wasn't a business client? You asked, okay, what do you want? What are your goals? What was common between them?
Well, I think what is the most common and universal is, and I say this knowing this to be true for myself and observing it in others, is the process, again, this word of curiosity, right? And being and asking questions and reflecting, and really whether it's spaghetti on the wall or through a different modality, but self-discovery. So this idea of really getting curious about who you are, getting to know yourself, and then starting to trust yourself. Because I think that you can have a knowing, but then a trusting yourself, and then by extension, making choices that, the way that I kind of roughly put it, is do less harm. I mean, they do less harm to you because they're more in alignment with who you are, and they do less harm to others by extension, right? Because I think we've all done that thing where, I mean, I've done it, where you say yes to the thing because, it feels like you can't say no, and you say yes, but then, I don't know, you don't really end up showing up with your full self, or you start to become resentful. And honestly, is that good for the organization or the person that you said yes to? No. Like, how much better would it have been to be honest with yourself, to say, gosh, that's not a good fit. And I mean, maybe it's something that, say it's a volunteer organization and it's something that you really believe in. You can also get creative and say, I can't, commit to a weekly thing, but gosh, do you have some take home work or something? Do you have something I can do? So a no doesn't have to be a hard no. I'm kind of getting in the weeds here, because I think some of your audience might say, oh, well, it's very easy for you to say, oh, just say no, or just say yes to things that you're in alignment for. But I guess I'm trying to get in the nuance here, where by saying no to that weekly thing, that allows the space for someone else to show up weekly who is probably a great fit. And there's also other ways that you can get creative and ask questions about, how else could you show up for this organization that is more in alignment with who you are?
So now I'm curious, when you did make the shift from working with business clients to people who were trying to do something different, maybe bigger with their life. With the business client, tell me if I'm wrong, but usually the reason for them to approach you is they saw some gap between where they were and where they wanted to be. And a lot of times those gaps were revenue targets, or maybe they were figuring out how to build a team, or all of the little business things. Now, when you shifted modes over to people just wanting to be happier with their life in general, I would think those people also saw a gap, and maybe they didn't exactly see where they wanted to be because it wasn't a hard target like a certain revenue point, but they just knew there was a gap between what they felt in the moment and how they wanted to be living their life. Maybe they wanted to show up more for their family. Maybe they wanted to show up more for themselves, but they'd been spending too much time showing up for their family. I'm in a situation like that right now. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So primarily I work with small groups now. So that I truly believed was the gap, is I felt like so much of the gap was having people interacting in real time, in person, So that was a big part of the impetus of change for me too. I knew I had to make a change, but kind of finally identifying what it was that I was going to do. And it took me a while. It was, I did the master's, I graduated, I worked on a book for a while for a nonprofit, a local nonprofit, which was a wonderful experience. And I allowed myself, though, because I have rushed in the past because I can be very uncomfortable with not knowing. So I thought, okay, again, just take a breath and be willing to listen to what the information is that you're getting. And the gap that I really saw was having conversations that are not with someone. I'm very clear that the offerings that I have, because besides discovering your spiritual autobiography, I also started doing a weekly salon, so to speak, and kind of seasonally. And that's a little more casual. Some people were highly allergic to the word spiritual. But the gap that I do see and that I did anticipate in these groups is a loneliness. And these are people that are very social. These are not people that are isolating themselves necessarily. But the connection is that they're having oftentimes, and sometimes by their own, behavior and choices, is superficial. And so these spaces that I create and the journals hopefully too give people a way to have deeper connection. I think it's all related, how connected we can be with ourselves that allows us to be connected to our family, our friends, others in our lives. A lot of times people will join my groups because everyone thinks they want to write. Writing it. I mean, everyone's got a
Yeah.
book, right?
Right.
Everyone thinks they want to write.
It's true.
And and the truth is that writing is hard. And so a lot
Also
of
true.
people don't actually want to write, but there's something that's speaking to them, right? I think that desire to write is to be heard or to feel like they matter in this very disposable, soundbite world. If anything, my kind of spaces and what I'm putting out there for the world is maybe the slow conversation version of slow food, right? And I ask people, put away your devices when we're in this space. Let's keep confidentiality so that we can speak from our heart. And it's been pretty incredible because people have shared, I know for a fact, because they've told me, they have shared things that they have never said aloud in the group. This is just one-on-one. And I'm very clear. I'm not a therapist. I discourage political conversation in these spaces. We're focusing on being human.
I've got a question about that. I think you and I are in the same generation. It's the one that ends with X, and we weren't raised super gently. I don't know that we were raised much at all, but we kind of were.
No, we weren't.
I mean, at 6 years old, I had a key to get into my house when I got home from school and let myself in and got a snack. All that stuff that the youngsters don't believe right now. Which leads me to ask this question, because a lot of times with life coaches, a lot of times with anything spirituality, and I know you're working with more than one just generation. You're working with maybe some people a little older, people a little younger. But right now in our generation, is that kind of age where you are trying to find yourself? Maybe the kids are a little older and you don't have to deal with them all day, every day anymore. And you're sitting in the quiet with your thoughts and you're thinking, okay, who am I now? And in so many things that I see that are with spiritual related groups or life coaching, it's like, okay, be non-judgmental, be gentle with yourself, love yourself. And I was like, yeah, we weren't wired that way. That's I don't even know. I remember I was walking with a friend one time. She's like, oh, are those new jeans? And I was like, yeah, these are my fat jeans because I've gained some weight. And she's like, you're fat, Gene. You really should be gentle with yourself. And I was like, that was the gentle version. And she's like, oh my God, what is the non-gentle version if that's the gentle one? And I was like, well, I'll put it this way. I know 5 fat people and I'm 4 of them right now. So these are my fat genes. This is what I'm walking in. And that's just how things are right now until I can get myself together. And she's like, okay, I'm glad you don't put the real version of what you think when we talk. I was like, no, I'm filtered. You're good. We're fine. But how do you balance the whole be gentle with yourself, love yourself, with also a little dose of this? Life is hard. Sometimes life sucks. Or yeah, you've been living this way for a really long time, and this is what that looks like on the other side. So let's talk about what could be different. How do you balance those two things as a coach?
Yes. And I'm saying yes because I am completely in agreement with so many things that you said. I am definitely Gen Xer and proud of it. And feel like I was barely raised. Thank goodness for my grandparents. And
Same here.
it's interesting because I feel like I'm a pretty blunt person. Sometimes it's something that I wish that I could be a little softer about it. Yeah. And I mean, I'm like, if you ask me a question, I'm going to give you the answer that I have. So yes, there is always that. And I think there's what is interesting is as I kind of observe people and especially in this setting that I've created, a couple of things come to mind. I recently did a women's only group, which wasn't something I was really thinking about doing. And I kind of met somebody's request to do this. And I was a little hesitant, frankly, because I feel like women in general can maybe be a little bit harder to bring together in a group and managing the dynamic. And I did this group. It was for 4 weeks and had a variety of ages. And it didn't quite end up the way that I was hoping it would end up. I'm actually going to do it again this year because I have some things I want to do differently. I had made assumptions that people were more at a place of openness based on the material that I sent out about the description of the group than they were. And so unfortunately, that assumption that I made kind of clouded my ability I didn't quite pivot quickly enough in the moment. And in that group, it wasn't a space for me to be more hard or demanding because I just felt like the group couldn't handle it. So I think a gap between my facilitation and my audience. So there are definitely these moments where I will back off. And that's kind of a funny space for me to be, being the person that I am. Then there are those moments where I can be very with my group. And a lot of times as we're doing exercises and particularly sharing out loud, I will lead with a deep and dark story. And I'll give you an example. I will never forget. I was doing just part of a workshop. I mean, I was part of a bigger retreat, and I was leading a singular workshop around friendship, the meaning of friendship, how friendship can change our lives, all that kind of good stuff. And prior to my actual time that I was going to have my groups, I was participating in the other groups. We had kids that were high school. We had older retired people, so real big age range. And I'm trying to remember the prompt, but everyone was kind of fidgeting. The kids were looking at their phones. The older people were, this is a little mean to older people, but kind of looking for the snacks and thinking about getting up and getting that next cup of coffee because it's free. And gosh, I want to remember the prompt, but I can't. So I was looking around the table and I thought, I'm going for it. I'm going for it. And I guess what I told them about is being dishonest in my second marriage. And I told them how someone that I had dated prior to getting married the second time had reached out to me, and I allowed for a conversation, not just one conversation, but multiple conversations. Actually, I said I met the person for coffee. I was very clear that this wasn't physical connection. However, it was an emotional affair, and I hid it. I did not tell my second husband at the time that this person had reached out to me, and that I was so unhappy in my marriage, and I felt so horrible about myself that I had no idea how starved I was to talk to somebody who thought that I was a nice person or a good person or that had good ideas or just someone to laugh with. And I did that. I made that choice, and it's not a choice that I was proud of. If I had to do it again, would I do it differently? Heck yeah. But that's a choice I made, and I also live with the consequences.
When you lead with a story like that, does it encourage other people to say, okay, I'll follow suit, and then maybe their walls come down a little bit more?
I think it definitely gets everybody thinking, because they don't know me as that person. I mean, nobody at the table really knew me that well, actually. They think they know things about me because they're looking at me and thinking based on what I'm wearing or whatever that they've got some idea of who I am, but they don't know me. So I think why I choose to do that is not so that I can, get a medal because I told the most revealing story. But in that moment, maybe I can at least chip away a little bit at some of the disconnect that people have within themselves, and also model that there are safe spaces that we can share very unflattering stories about ourselves, essentially, or stories that, this was this was actually a church retreat. So, talking about an affair is not really, within the thing. And I think also just to the three teenagers there, just to kind of maybe say, gosh, no matter who you are, what age you are, there's so much stuff that goes on, and there's so much. I mean, this whole job of being human is messy, messy stuff.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, kind of related to that, when you have a client and they come to you and they see a gap between where they are and how they feel and where they want to be in their life. After a couple of conversations with them and hearing what they wish for themselves, what they maybe complain about, what keeps coming up in their life, maybe you start to see the patterns as an outside observer. And you realize that this person has a blind spot that they are either not willing to see over time. How do you strike the balance between keeping that safe space that coaches try to do so their clients will be more willing to accept feedback or whatever it is that needs to happen? What's the balance between doing that and saying to them, okay, I hear these things from you a lot, and maybe it's not a them problem?
Well, I love Jerry Colum, I think is how you pronounce his last name. But he has this great coaching question, which is, how are you complicit in that which you are complaining about?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Nearly everything. 100% of it.
Well, or even when we're getting, I mean, we were talking about getting angry, right? A little bit earlier. I mean, every time we get angry, at least in my experience, I'm just angry with myself, right? I'm angry with if whether or not I'm getting frustrated while I'm driving my car because the person in front of me is going too slowly. Well, I'm angry with myself because I should have left earlier, but no, I thought I was going to do one more thing, right? Or if I'm angry with so and so because they didn't do the thing that I wanted them to do, but actually they are behaving exactly how they always behave. I mean, I'm the one, I'm angry with myself because either I kind of let myself fall into my old thinking of, oh, it's going to be different this time. So I think that introducing, and sometimes it can be more straightforward depending on the person, and sometimes it has to be a little bit circumspect, is that reflection, is encouraging that reflection. And whether you're in a situation where you're asking questions or kind of prescribing prompts, journaling prompts, and things like that, that ask that person. But I mean, the other thing too is that there are so many people who want to change, or let's say they say they want to change, and they don't really.
They just want things to be different.
They just want things to be different. And a lot of
Yeah.
and a lot of times it's not even they don't want things to be different, because if things were different, then what would they complain about?
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
there's certain people you feel like you have the same conversations with them, and you're like, well, if you actually just kind of put that down, you didn't pick up the rope on that one, like, wow, you'd have so much free time.
Yeah.
And you'd probably be like, you have 10 times, 20 times more energy. Like, wow, what would you do with that? But boy, that's scary to a lot of people.
Yeah, I guess it could be. And that brings us full circle back to your journal, Spaghetti on the Wall, which I think is a fantastic title. But you've got another journal. I'm on your website right now. It's kristanswan.com. We'll have that on the show notes. But you've got a new journal. It's not out yet, right?
No, it's coming out at the end of the month, and it's called Heart Mapping. And the little tagline or subtitle is Create the Cartography of Your Inner Landscape.
Okay.
I know.
All right. That's cool. So we're mapping out our inner landscape. That's pretty cool.
Well, I'm a former geography major, so whenever I can throw that geography language in there, I love it. But yeah, this one, heart mapping, is a little different for me because I have been, talk about full circle, my creative journey began with visual arts and really moved towards writing. I feel like as I got more connected with myself, I was always drawn to writing, having been a voracious reader. I can't remember not being able to read, but I think that writing myself was really intimidating because I just didn't kind of have the words for everything. The visual arts were so much easier. And then when I did design work, it was kind of that same extension. So heart mapping was really born out of a recent experience where I was about to do Spaghetti on the Wall, my morning practice. And I was like, oh, I'm like, I've got so much going on. I'm just this is before coffee. And I just thought, I just have to draw, but not draw in a representational way. It was more that practice of the continuous line drawing and putting pencil to paper and just drawing what is in you, and you do it for as long as you need. And then once you remove the pen from paper, you're done. And so heart mapping gives you an invitation to do a continuous line drawing, and then there's a facing page to what you have just put on paper that invites you to use the next page however you need it. If you're going to need to draw more, now you're ready to journal, if you need to make a grocery list, like whatever you need to do on that facing page, that is your space.
That's cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for telling us about that. That will be out by the time this episode is
good.
out. So
Yes.
yeah, if you're listening to this, that is out right now. Fantastic. Well, Kristan, thank you so much for being here today and having this conversation. It was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you. I really had a great time, and I feel like we probably could have talked about a million other things. And the last thing I will say is one of our biggest jobs as parents is raising adults.
Yeah.
And we want to model behavior that is going to help our children become adults. So self-care, self-discovery, boundaries, those are all things that are healthy for our children to see.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to leave it. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for joining me today. If something in this episode stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Screenshot it and tag me, or DM me on the socials, send smoke signals, whatever works. I want to know what you're plotting. This show isn't just about listening. It's about building something real together. So I hope to hear from you soon, and I'll be right here next week when you're ready to keep the rebellion going.